15 years ago, rain lashed against the stained glass windows of the Hartwell estate, turning the family crest, a serpent coiled around a mortar and pestle, into a blurred watermark. Julia Hartwell stood in the grand foyer, her ivory silk gown clinging to her skin like a second betrayal. Her father's voice boomed across the marble floor. "You choose that man over your family? Don't expect a dime from me." David, her fiancé, gripped her hand tighter, his signet ring digging into her palm. "We'll build our own life," he vowed, his breath warm against her ear. "No gilded cages, just us." She believed him. Present day? The fluorescent lights of St. Mercy Hospital buzzed like trapped wasps. Julia Hartwell, now 42, adjusted the morphine drip of her elderly patient, Mr. Connolly, his papery fingers brushing hers in gratitude. "You're too good for this place," he rasped, his voice frayed by emphysema. She forced a smile. Too good for hospice? Perhaps. But after 18 years of night shifts and missed anniversaries, exhaustion had hollowed her into a ghost of the idealistic woman she'd once been. "Rest, Mr. Connolly," she murmured. "Your daughter's coming tomorrow." Her phone vibrated, a text from David. "Reservations at 8. Don't embarrass me this time." She stared at the screen. Their marriage had become a series of canceled dinners and passive-aggressive memos. By the time she soothed Mrs. Reyes' panic attack in room 214, "They're poisoning me, I know it." The clock read 8:30 p.m. She texted David an apology. His reply was swift. Unsurprising. When she stumbled into their penthouse at midnight, he was asleep, a half-empty bottle of Chateau Margaux on the table. The single wine glass beside it felt like a slap. The lawyer's call came at dawn. Arthur Lowell's voice crackled through the phone. "Your father passed. The will requires your presence." The law office smelled of leather and regret. Arthur, a man with a face like crumpled parchment, slid a document across the desk. "You inherit 51% of Hartwell Pharmaceuticals," he said, "if you apologize publicly for marrying David and divorce him within the year." Julia's laugh was brittle. "Tell my father to rot in hell." "He's already there," Arthur replied. "Pancreatic cancer. He refused treatment." The words gutted her. Cancer. The disease she'd spent her career comforting others through. Her father had died alone, pride intact, while she'd wasted years defending a man who mocked her scrubs and called her work charity cosplay. "Why now?" she whispered. Arthur hesitated. "He followed your career, knew about David's reputation." David's affair was obvious. The junior doctor's cloying perfume, vanilla and ambition, lingered on his collar. His phone lit up with hard-eyed texts. When Julia confronted him, he shrugged. "You're never home. What did you expect?" The divorce papers arrived a week later. Irreconcilable differences. He demanded the penthouse, their savings, alimony. "You'll regret this," she warned, voice trembling. "With what money?" he sneered. That night, she combed through his home office. The mahogany desk, a gift from her father years ago, felt like a taunt. Behind a false panel, she found spreadsheets, patient IDs, opioid prescriptions, payments from a rival pharma company, kickbacks. Her hands shook. How many of his patients had died addicted and bankrupt? The cemetery was silent, save for the crunch of gravel beneath Julia's boots. Gerald Hartwell's headstone loomed. Visionary. Patriarch. He hated that epitaph. Julia turned. Her sister Elise stood in a tailored black coat, her CEO polish frayed at the edges. "He wanted stubborn bastard carved into the marble," Elise said, but the board vetoed it. They talked for hours about Elise's divorce, Julia's patients, their father's secret donations to St. Mercy. "He followed your career," Elise admitted, "said you were the only one with Hartwell grit." "Then why the clause?" Julia snapped. Elise sighed. "To force you back, to prove David wasn't worth it." That night, Julia drafted her apology, a speech honoring nurses, her father's relentless drive, and the cost of blind loyalty. The press conference buzzed with flashing cameras. Julia stepped onto the stage, her scrubs replaced by a charcoal pantsuit. "I apologize," she said, "for believing I had to choose between family and integrity. Today, I choose both." The headlines blazed. "Heiress nurse takes over Hartwell Pharma." David stormed into her office days later, face mottled with rage. "You lied to me." "No," she said coolly, sliding a folder across her desk. "You never asked." Inside were copies of his opioid records, already sent to the medical board. "Your license is revoked? The alimony?" "Denied." As security dragged him out, she turned to the window, the city sprawling beneath her. Sunlight glinted off the ribbon as Julia snipped it. The Hartwell Community Clinic stood stark and modern in David's old neighborhood. Inside, his former nurses, now hers, greeted patients with free screenings and subsidized medications. Dr. Hartwell's old patients? A reporter asked. Everyone deserves a second chance, Julia said. Across the street, David lingered in a stained coat, unrecognizable. Julia caught his eye and raised her coffee cup in a silent toast. Why build here? The reporter pressed. She smiled. Healthcare shouldn't be a luxury. Somewhere, Gerald Hartwell grumbled in his grave, and perhaps, just perhaps, smiled.